Hi everyone, we are live from the Studio B headquarters over on River Street. Just wanted to send a message that the beginning of the recording this past Tuesday for Mindfulness of Feelings was cut off. So we had a little bit of a technical issue. So just a reminder, when we started our conversation on Tuesday, the message that I wanted to get across, the primary message, is that working with feelings and emotions is some of the most difficult work that we do in the mindfulness meditation practices, but also some of the most profound work. So we're just really, what I wanted to emphasize in this short message is just to navigate really slowly as you go through these practices this week, and just continue to remind yourself to take great care when you're noticing some of these difficulties rise up, and always look for how this experience feels in the body. Be willing to get really curious with it. Remember to lean into that RAIN acronym of recognizing that a feeling tone is servicing that could be unpleasant or pleasant. Be willing to allow it to be here. So remember, the A is allow. Allow that feeling to be present. Discomfort can be a part of this practice. It often will be. So just recognizing that this is just a normal part of the human experience, that we're not always in a space of comfort. And the more we turn towards that discomfort, and the more we invite it in and just allowing it to kind of be present, the more space is created within that feeling or strong emotion that might be sitting underneath it. The third letter in the RAIN acronym is I. Investigate, get curious about it, right? Knowing that here we are, anger has shown up, it's in the room. Remember, we're going to keep it in the back seat. And that N is nurture and non-identify. So we don't have to lean into the whys of why this discomfort has shown up, why we're having an unpleasant experience, why a difficult emotion perhaps entered the room. We want to keep non-identified with it. And of course, if it becomes too sharp or intense, just nurturing. So going back to the metta practices, I taught you how to just bring your hand to your chest, bring your attention back to the breath, rest in a space of the meditation that feels nurturing, or drop into the metta practices. Of course, if you're going through the week and you're not sure you want to navigate this territory without the support or guidance of a teacher, we've provided some great meditations in the portal, some metta or loving kindness meditations that will be very supportive if you need to just pause with that until we see you again on Tuesday. So again, feel free to reach out. Again, you'll notice that when you jump into the video, the very beginning is cut off, but all of the rest of the good, juicy content is there. Feel free to reach out with any questions. You could email me directly at jennifer@meetyourcenter.com. Thank you. I'll see you next week. To kind of inform the rest of your day, right? Because then if we sit for our meditation, especially if we're practicing in the morning, but this could also certainly be done at night, right? Or in the middle of the day, you may notice, wow, I have a really unpleasant tone here. And it could be for a lot of reasons, right? It could be because of a situation that you're dealing with in your personal life. It could be a challenge at work. It could be, though, just something going on inside of you, your hormones, right? Chemicals inside your body changing, the dinner you ate last night, something didn't sit with you, We start noticing that our body's responding in different ways, and there's a feeling tone that's associated with that. So these feeling tones could be very predictable or unpredictable. You might start noticing patterns or associations with these tones as they come up. That's why a lot of people will keep a journal close by when they meditate, and they'll kind of track it. And you might actually start seeing, based on your cycles of being human, right? Based on how much sleep you got the night before or didn't get, right? And then you start noticing, okay, I could navigate from here. So if there's a pleasant tone and I'm feeling really positive about my life, maybe that's the day that I tackle some big projects that I've been kind of putting off, right? If I'm waking up and sitting and noticing inside that there's a very unpleasant tone, maybe we shift the day in the other direction, right? Perhaps taking something off of your plate. So we start naming features within the practices. And these are different methods, generally called insight practices. So up until now, we've mainly been working on or with concentration methods, the shamatha practices, right? Settling and stabilizing the system in the mind, bringing the attention and focus into the prefrontal cortex. Now, what we're layering on is developing insight into what's actually real. So remember, the definition of mindfulness is moment-to-moment awareness, moment to moment, without the urge to change anything. So dealing with what's here right now, the reality of what's here right now, without the urge to manipulate whatever's happening. And the more comfortable you get with sitting in a really quiet way and knowing, understanding, and accepting that things are pretty unpleasant right now, and I could be with this unpleasantness without it owning me. The more we could return to that space in a really skillful way when it's coming up, which it undoubtedly will, in many different ways, in many different situations throughout any day. Right? So what we also know, another truth of feelings, is that they are impermanent. Have you ever been in a feeling that stayed there and didn't change? Has anyone? No. Right? Even somebody that's dealing with clinical depression will have moments that depression has settled a bit. Right? Even in moments of ecstasy, which we want to hang on to, they change. Right? Those neutral states change. So this truth of impermanence really rises up when we start looking in and noticing the space of the heart. Everything in the practice, everything we do in this practice of awareness, of developing awareness and emotional intelligence, loving kindness, everything, all of these practices bring us from the stories happening inside the mind that wants to control everything. The mind wants to be in control. And so all of the practices we're doing take us from those stories, which may or may not be true or real, right? And getting entangled in some stories, ruminating over some stories that are in the mind, and getting out of those stories and move us into the heart. And the heart space is open and vast and boundless, and the capacity of the heart is beyond my understanding, right? So the more we could get into that spaciousness of the heart, the more freedom we have there. Whereas the mind wants to kind of trap us into the problem-solving parts of the brain. Right? So the freedom really resides here. So we want to get comfortable looking at feelings. So let's do a short practice and start working with this idea. Any questions before we start on just feelings? Okay. We're going to do a 5-minute practice. Actually, I'm going to make it a 6-minute practice because I want to keep us in the agatika, right? So remember the 24, 12, 6, 3, right? We can start working with those agatikas. Remember, the agatika is just a cycle of time. It's associated with Tibetan Buddhist practices. That's the root of it. But that agatika cycle is once we start working with the 24-minute cycles, we start seeing a lot of patterns a little clearer. So as we move into the insight practices, it could be very supportive. Okay? All right, so sitting up nice and tall. Just grounding your feet, close your eyes. Inviting the tones in to land you here in your body. And bringing your attention into the body in this seated position, noticing. Really feeling into the feet against the floor and the sit bones supported in the chair. Feeling your hands resting on your legs. And now bringing your attention into the breath just as it is. And if the breath does not feel supportive for this practice today, feel free to use the hands or your feet or the rise and fall of the chest even as an anchor. Now bring your attention into this space of the heart, this center space of the heart under the sternum. And feel your breath there for a moment. Just moving in and out. The chest moving up and down. And imagine lifting a veil and peeking beneath it to look and see what's there. Just this general feeling tone. And you could even ask yourself, how are things right now in this space of the heart? And some of you might not feel anything. So just keep asking, how are things right now? How am I in this moment? And remember, the answer could be neutral. Pleasant or unpleasant. And whatever that answer is, see if you could just invite it in. As a truth. You could even imagine holding it softly, cradling this feeling like a mother would cradle her child. If anything feels overwhelming, feel free to back away from that edge or just drop this visualization completely. You could even just open your eyes and soften your gaze or rest your attention in your anchor. If you're still working with this feeling tone, see if you could keep turning towards it with a loving curiosity, a loving friendliness, welcoming it in. You could begin dropping or resting or just placing this insight, any insights gathered, just placing it down, returning to the anchor, and welcoming the sound in. Okay, so how did that go for you guys? How did you feel? What did you notice? Anybody want to share?
That was more challenging for me than most. I just couldn't really connect to any one thing. It just felt like everything was all there and I couldn't quite get to it.
Everything could be an answer,
Yeah.
right? I feel all of it. Right? There's some pleasant, there's some unpleasant, there's a lot of neutral. That's okay. Yeah. So just noticing that you were struggling is also okay, right? Because some practices are just going to be harder than others, especially when we're digging into some different method.
Yeah, because I expected to, after hearing what you said, I expected to find something like that and just really attach to
Have
it.
something to work with. It
was just all there. I just was, good, bad, neutral.
Yeah, it's all there. Anybody else? Did anyone have a really specific thing come up? Or really know? Yeah, feeling tones are tough. And it's something that we're all going to need a little time with. Because what's the other part of a feeling tone? We said it earlier. Emotions. And so we could recognize those easier, can't we? Because they are so sharp and intense generally. Very sharp. And sometimes very reactive. Right? So we react with emotions, but a feeling tone is the foundation. So if we understand the feeling tone, what does that mean for emotions? We have a little more control over them, right? We could create a little bit more space. They become less reactive and more responsive, right? We could protect ourselves a little bit more and the people around us. So if we know, man, I'm starting my day with this really rotten tone, right? Because we all start our days like that sometimes. That's the truth of the matter. Then we could be a little more guarded with our energy and time, right? You might know, wow, I'm going to be more reactive today, probably. So it creates a little more control over what might pop up. All right? But we have to get to know those tones. And this is also where the body practices, the embodiment practices come in, and they're especially helpful. So for those of you that practice yoga, right, or any movement practice really, but especially the more contemplative, slower moving stuff, sometimes when we're in a yoga shape, we could get really irritated by it. So this tone will kind of bubble up, and you're like, what is going on? What is that? It could, or it may or may not have a feeling or an emotion tied to it, but there's a tone there, right? And because we're in a yoga class and because there's a lot of other tools available, we'll notice that that tone might peak. There might be some emotions tied to it. Wrapped up in those emotions might be some stories that come to mind, memories, right? Ideas. We also might notice sensation in the body. Now, that could peak and lead us to a sensation in the body or a story or a memory, all of those things. But all of those things could also be supportive when we're having trouble connecting to a tone. So the next method I really want to introduce to you is finding a way into the body when you're working with a tone or when you're unable to find a tone, right? But especially when a tone is attached to an emotion. So a lot of times when we're working with tones, an emotion could come up. Irritation, agitation, fear, right? Anger, joy, contentment, right? All of the emotions could come up at any given moment, and we learn how to work with them. And the idea is to turn towards them and name it. All right? So with the tones rising up, we're going to work a little bit and to see if there's something else there. All right, so that's the next slogan. What's here right now, number one. Is there something else here? Is there something underneath it? So remember when I said you could lift that veil up? So we've been working so much with the body. We went to the heart space and we lifted the veil of the heart. What's there? Looking for the tone. Now what I'm going to ask you to do in the next meditation is, okay, lift that tone up. Even if there's nothing, even if the answer is nothing or everything. What else is there? And that's the slogan I want you to ask a few times. Is there something else there? The answer might still be nothing or everything. Okay, this is the first time you're doing it and you might need practice. Okay? If there is something else there or nothing there, what the next guidance will be is to, okay, let's look and see where this is located in your body. All right? Where is this in your body, this experience that you're having right now? All right? And really try to, you may say everywhere, nowhere, that could be an answer, right? But if something comes up for you, see if you could turn towards it. So when I say turn towards it, is anyone struggling with that? Turn towards it. Okay? Remember when we're in the stress response, what we tend to do is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Okay? And fawn is something that was added within the last 10 years to that. Does everybody know what that means? Okay. So fight or flight, everybody's really familiar with. We've all experienced it. Freeze is nothing. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to freeze, right? Fawn is to make everything okay in that stress response. And fawning is something that is really linked to somebody that has dealt with dysfunction and trauma, right? So especially if, for me, my stepfather was a violent alcoholic, right? So it's something I've really had to work with, because my job as the oldest of 3 children was to make sure everybody was okay as a child, right? Fix everything. So that trauma it stays with you until you start working with it. So fawning is just this natural, a lot of empaths, right? So if you identify as being an empath, it's something that you probably you feel familiar with, fawning, okay? 1 in 4 adults in the United States has dealt with trauma in their lives. 1 in 4, okay? So we're not asking you to identify with it, especially here in a public space, but know that 1 in 4 adults have dealt with trauma in their childhood. So it's something that these practices will help significantly with. So as we're going through and looking at the body, if anything feels overwhelming, anything, especially starting to work with this stuff, you have the agency to decide for yourself where the edge is. And you could step away from that edge and just land in your breath, land in the sensation of your hands, tune me out, open your eyes, stand up. Just relax into a space of comfort inside, okay? I've been there. I've had to use those alternate routes sometimes, right? But you have the authority and agency to make those decisions for yourself. So if something feels comfortable as we're looking at feelings, if you just want to stay there and work with feelings, you could stay there. If you want to go deeper and look at an emotion, you could look at that. And if it's too much to look inside the body, feel free not to look. Understood? So we're going to give it a try. And then we're going to work on one more method for today after this. Okay, so we're going to sit and the tones are going to come in and hands are down, and you can either close your eyes for this meditation or you could just rest your eyes down. So just resting the eyes forward and down. That's up to you. Inviting the sound in, the tones in. And just acknowledging for a moment your body, the shape that your body's in, the seat. Again, just noticing your feet against the floor, your sit bones in the chair. Just take a moment here, recognizing this body and this space, this room that we're sharing. Taking a moment to connect and look in at the breath and how the breath is right now. See if you could just describe it or give it a quality for just a moment. And if the breath feels like a supportive anchor, you could stay there. Or feel free to choose a different anchor for this practice. Maybe your feet against the floor, your hands resting on your lap. And now inviting in that question, how are things right now? Looking into the heart space to see what is here. Returning to the anchor when you need to. And noticing if there's some curiosity. And perhaps looking beneath whatever it is you noticed. So you could imagine or visualize lifting up a cloth or a veil to kind of peek beneath and asking what else is here. And whether or not you discovered anything, see if you could now find it in your body. So naming what you found and then locating it in the body. And you can either dig a little deeper by turning towards this space inside, this experience. Or you could just allow that experience to soften and just return to the anchor of the breath or the body. Either way, just see if you could rest and relax into what is. Imagine just holding or cradling anything that came up, inviting it in, giving it permission to be present. And I'd like to invite you now, just kind of relax this method, turning your attention into the anchor, noticing the feeling tone as it is right now. Okay, so was that easier or harder More interesting or less interesting?
That was harder for me. I couldn't stay concentrated. I couldn't even tell you how many times I restarted.
Yeah, that's okay. It's the truth of it,
It's
right?
gonna take more practice.
More practice. Yeah. It takes a little practice. Anybody else want to share anything that came up or anything you noticed?
I found what I was feeling
Yeah,
and where it was.
yeah. This work can sometimes be really hard, right? Because it's unexpected often. Yeah. So just sit up. We're all going to sit up for just a moment. Close your eyes. And I'd like to invite each of you to place your right hand on your heart space. And you could keep your right hands there, or you could invite the left hand to rest on top of the right hand. So you either one or both. And just bring your attention into the warmth of your hands on your chest. Noticing the rise and fall of the chest. And the warmth and weight of your hands. See if you could just rest your attention there for a moment. This simple act of self-compassion, kindness towards oneself, this simple act of placing your hands on your heart encourages hormones of connection to move through your veins, calming the system, stimulating the parasympathetic response. Just taking a few more breaths. And you could relax your hands down. Take a few deep breaths before opening your eyes. And really with the next exhale, just really emptying the breath out. And then we could all come back into the space. So, the last practice that I'm going to invite in today is a supportive practice called RAIN. And this is just simply an introduction to RAIN, because we will really jump into RAIN for the entire session when we meet again. Before we meet again though, and we meet again next Tuesday, so that's very good. We'll also provide you with a link to a RAIN meditation led by one of my teachers, Tara Brock, which will be very, very supportive as you're working with feelings over the next week, which is what we'll ask you to do in your meditations. So you could get more comfortable working with defining what you're noticing in your practice. So just simply pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. I don't want you to work with emotions on your own yet, okay? But know that they could come up. And if they do, this is the method to work with them. Okay? So RAIN simply stands, it's an acronym, and R stands for recognize. So we're looking and we're naming feeling tone, and then I want you to recognize if something else is there. And often there could be, but often there might not be anything, right? Especially if we're in that neutral space, it's harder to see. But if something unpleasant or pleasant is the first answer, sometimes something strong could come up. So recognize if that happens. Recognize it. Okay? A stands for allow. Allow it to be there. Don't push it down. So just like a screaming child, the more you push it down, you try to quiet it, what happens, right? Yeah. And that's exactly what will happen with an emotion if you just push it away. All right? So just allow it to be present. Okay? Fear is here. Hello, fear. Come on in. Right? You can imagine, I like to imagine there's this beautiful poem by Rumi. I don't think we've shared, I think we shared in this module as a supportive part of it. But it says, open the door and invite them in. These unexpected visitors that come, right? They come in to sweep our house clean, he says in the poem, right? So just invite it in, like open the door. Okay, hello, anger's present, right? Hello, anger, right? I feel you in the back of my neck, right? Wherever it is in your body. So allow it to be there. You could name it, the experiencing that you're having in your body with it. I is investigate. So get curious about it. Oh, okay, anger's here. I'm going to let it be here because I think I could be with it. Or frustration or whatever is coming up. Or joy, right? Let's feel joy. Where is it? Wow, my heart feels big. Okay, where are the edges here? What kind of shape is it? What kind of color? You could get really creative with the investigate, right? What am I noticing come up with it? Is there a story, right? Is there a memory that's surfacing? Describe it. Get curious about it. Because remember, we're turning towards. So when we do that, this is how the emotion comes up, really sharp, and that grip starts to loosen. And then it becomes a little more spacious, right? And it might get a little bigger before it starts dissolving and falling away. But that experience of impermanence is really, really important, because what we know from a neuroscientific perspective is that an emotion, a strong emotion, how long do you think it lasts in your brain neurologically? Any guesses? It's a pretty, well, that's a good question, and I'll explain it. But neurologically, an emotion lasts for how long? Any ideas? 90 seconds. 90 seconds. An emotion rises and it falls. Why does it stay longer? Any ideas?
Because it keeps coming back.
We get attached to it. And then we ruminate about it. And the brain gets involved. The mind starts thinking about it. Oh, I'm so angry. I'm so angry. I'm so angry. I can't believe that this happened. I can't believe that this happened, right? And we ruminate on it, and it stays longer than it should. But if we could just track an emotion neurologically, rising up and passing through, 90 seconds. And that's what we learn to do in these practices when we stay with it and we just let it follow its course. Okay? And then when the emotion settles, we don't have to be reactive to it. There may be still stories and other emotions that come up around it, right? But it's not going to be like anger driving the car. We don't want anger to drive the car. We want anger to stay in the back seat. We could still be pissed off for a couple of weeks or months or years, right? That's how long it might take to forgive the action of the person that hurt us or our child, right? But if anger's driving the seat, what's going to happen? We're going to get in a crash, right? Things are going to happen that we never intended them to happen. Words will be spoken that we didn't think we were capable of saying, right? So as long as anger's staying in the back seat, we can manage through it. And then it's not so bad. Like anger could be present, but I could still function and experience joy and life, and it doesn't have to own me. I don't have to be yanked around by it. And unfortunately, we've all experienced that, me included, right? Where I get, something happens and it was really awful and I was very reactive, and then the mind gets involved and all these stories start ruminating, and then I get entangled in it, right? We get entangled. And then the emotion stays longer than it should. Whereas if I just would have paused and really felt it, as awful as that experience could be, then I could put anger in the back seat and I could drive the car and make some conscious decisions about how I work through it or work with it. Is that clear? So the investigation part, the I, is really important, but it's really hard because we feel it. And it's usually a really physical experience. And we have to be willing to feel it in order for that physical experience to happen. But once that physical experience, once we're called to it and it moves through us, it leaves. And it's never going to be as strong as it was that first time when we noticed it. There may be other garbage there that we have to work through, right? That could also suck. But the more we turn towards it, the more it'll loosen up. And it'll be easier and easier. So just by you getting creative and describing it and working with colors and textures and tones, right? That's the gateway in. It's the portal in. Does that make sense to everybody? And
what about if I don't want to allow that and I don't want to?
You don't have to go there.
Because that's the one that I did right now when we're trying to get the investigated.
Yep.
I'm just like trying to push that away.
Yeah. But
I don't want to deal with that anymore.
Right.
I don't want to get involved with the past anymore. I'm
right.
just like,
and
is any problem if I do that?
No. Absolutely not.
Is that gonna be like coming back, like pushing me back, like trying to get me like that? You know what I mean?
Right. It might keep showing up. But the N is very supportive. So we could jump to the N, which is two meanings. Nurture, right? Loving kindness, compassion. What we did at the end, just bringing your hand to your body if you're just not sure what the hell to do, right? That's going to calm the system down. And you could just say, okay, this is here. And I'm going to show myself compassion for it still being here. And I'm not going to work with it right now. That's my decision.
I'm just still kind of like scared to know.
Right, of course, yeah. But you might find that as you move along, you get more curious about it. Because you might start feeling like there's a little space. And maybe you start tiptoeing a little closer. Right? And then you might notice that it feels too sharp and risky, and you back off. And that's when the compassion comes in. It's okay. I'm not ready. Right? And so we always lean into the compassion practices, the loving kindness, loving tenderness, friendliness toward yourself. Because some things are too big, right? And we might need support there, right? And we have support on staff. So we have psychotherapists and psychologists, and if any of you feel like you need a little more support, as we're tiptoeing through the next couple weeks, please reach out and we'll set that up privately and it's covered and you can have a session with one of them and they'll work with you. They're all mindfulness teachers. All right. I needed more support working through some of my garbage, right? But that's where the freedom is on the other side of it. I believe that, right? But the other part of the freedom is through that self-compassion. It's so important. And we don't learn how to do that, right? We're so hard on ourselves. So we immediately lean into like, I'm doing something wrong. I should be able to do this. Why can't I go here? Why is it still here? Why is it still coming up? I know all this because I've gone through it, right? But if I could stress anything at all, the most important thing is that this is just part of being human. These are things that we all grapple with. Like we're all trying to figure it out, right? And for me, that freedom of knowing that anger is a normal part of being alive and having a human experience, that jealousy and shame are just part of being human, and that every other person in this room has experienced those sharp, awful, shitty emotions. That for me was like a game changer, right? Because I'm gonna go through the same things as every single one of you. And so that for me was freedom, right? Yes, there's going to be suffering in this human, precious human life that we have been given. And yes, there's going to be a hell lot of joy and beauty in it. And I want to be with both of those things, right? The best I can. So the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows in every human birth is a precept in the Buddhist practices. And it's beautiful, right? This is what we're given. All of us, right? No one's given 20,000 joys, right? And no sorrows, nobody. It's a lie, okay? So nurture, 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 nurture. The 2 guided meditations you'll get this week is rain and a metta practice. And if all you do all week is metta, and that feels good and supportive, just do metta, right? Metta practices are loving kindness practices. They teach us how to be kind to ourselves. And then that ripples out to everybody else. So when we start working with feelings, we have to work with metta and compassion practices hand in hand. They go hand in hand. All right? So nurture, and N also stands for non-identify. Don't identify with whatever's coming up. So this is a slogan that I want you to remember. A part of me is angry. Doesn't that feel different? Instead of saying, I'm just using anger. I don't know if it's anger that's coming up, right? A part of me is angry. Oh, that's interesting, right? Not I'm angry, or I'm anger, or I'm fear. A part of me is scared. A part of me is jealous, right? A part of me is happy, right? It loosens it down, because there's a lot of, what is that movie called with the little girl and all these parts come and visit her, all those emotions? What's Inside Out.
Yeah.
Right? If you haven't seen that movie, watch it. It's exactly what we're working with, right? I'm a human being and I have all these different parts inside of me. And sometimes happiness shows up, and sometimes joy shows up, and sometimes, ecstasy shows up, and sometimes jealousy shows up, or grief, right? And they could just be a part of me. They don't have to take over, you know, they don't have to jump into the driver's seat, right? You could use that visualization. I like that one a lot, right? So I could keep those tough things in the back seat, and they're there, and they're a part of me, but they're not driving the car. I'm driving the car, this big S, right? The big S. Okay? What questions do you have? We're running out of time. All right, take a deep breath. Let's shake it out real quick. Little heaviness. So stand up. We're gonna shake it out, quite literally. So when you see animals that are stressed, animals that are really distressed, they start shaking. Shake with me. Shake your fingers, get it out of you. You could even close your eyes. You could shake your arms over your head, right? So animals in nature will just shake everything off of them, right? We're letting it go. And you could do this for 30 seconds. You could do it for 5 minutes. The more you have to shake off, the longer you have to go, all right? And you could stop. And just notice. Really take notice before we move out of the space how your system feels right now. You should feel a little energized from all that shaking, a little warm.
I went for a run.
Yeah. All right.
I feel like Taylor Swift.
That was very, very good. Good work today. Are you excited to get into the next 2 sessions? I promise it won't be as heavy. A little heavy.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. Okay? But really good work today. Thank you. Feel free to reach out. Please reach out if you have any questions. If you need additional support, let us know. We'll make sure that you get it. Okay? All right.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
you.
Have a great day.